สวัสดีครับ Kasit Piromya once again. I will touch a bit on the current Thai political situation, which will be linked to the economic performance of Thailand, I think, for the next few years as a result of the COVID-19 and now as a result of the conflict between Ukraine and Russia in the European theater. What I have to say is that now the parliament is not in session, in recess, and it will be reopened again in the second half of the month of May. So, and when the parliament reconvenes, one of the first important agenda item would be the censure motion debate by the opposition parties to bring down the government of General Prayut Chan-o-cha. So that will be an important event in the Thai parliamentary system and in Thai politics in general. But currently, I think the situation looks quite good for General Prayut Chan-o-cha because many academic people in the media and so on had come out with a figure that the opposition will not be able to master a majority in the parliament, in the House of Representatives, in order to bring down General Prayut Chan-o-cha. They will not get the required number of about 232-33 seats. They don't have that enough. I think they are short by about 15 to 20 seats. Okay, in order to pass the motion of no confidence and defeat the government of General Prayut Chan-o-cha. So at this point in time, I think General Prayut Chan-o-cha looks comfortable that he can go through the censure debate and the motion to get him out of position will be defeated. And so with that in mind, General Prayut Chan-o-cha also at the same time has started to regroup his position by going around talking to fellow politicians and political party leaders. So he is more or less taking the leadership and the mantle of politics into his own hand, because for the past few years, I think he runs the government, but the affairs of politics, the political parties and so on, he did leave it to General Pravit Wongsuwan, his mentor and senior member when they were in the military together. But lately, I think General Pravit Wongsuwan seems to be losing the hold on the political parties and politicians and so on. And maybe his health is not as good as it was to be and so used to be. So now General Prayut Chan-o-cha has started to take up the leadership, rallying the support, the people, reaching out not only to politicians but to the people and so on, in order to strengthen his position, not only for the censure motion in the second half of the month of May, but he is now looking forward to the next general elections of Thailand that will most probably take place towards the end of this year or at the latest the beginning of next year. So we are talking about 6 to 8 months period for new general elections for Thailand, and General Prayut needs to have a comfortable majority in the House of Representatives for him to run the country, the government, for the third time as the Prime Minister of Thailand. So in general, what I would like to say today is that I think the stability of General Prayut Chan-o-cha as a Prime Minister looks good, and the stability of his government and his future government at this point in time looks conducive favorable. But all is not roses, and I think the big challenge for him will be on the recovery of the economic situation of Thailand and like many other countries that was, I think, pounded not only by the 2008 financial crisis, but especially the past 2 years by the COVID-19, and now the repercussions forthcoming from the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. The battle between the two countries and so on. So I think the task for General Prayut Chan-o-cha from now on is not only to recuperate and I think re-strengthen his political position, but also to, I think, serve the Thai society in the situation, in the, I think, recovering of the economic and the social well-being. Because inflation has come about, the cost of living has been rising, there is much uncertainty in the, I think, the overall economic situation, whether in terms that there will not be the tourist flow, which is very important for Thai economy. There will be, I think, slow inflow of foreign direct investment. Then at the same time, I think there is disruption in the supply chain, uncertainty in the transportation by sea and things like this and so on. And I think that it would affect, I think, also the import and the export performance of Thailand. It might also have the effect on the, I think, the exchange rate of the baht and so on. See, and I think overall it is about the quality of life that has to be maintained. And in that sense, I think General Prayut Chan-o-cha and his government must think in a very thorough manner on how to cope with the immediate situation. And second, how to, I think, plan for the medium and the long-term recovery of Thailand as well as the social well-being. I think one of the things that he has to do, from my point of view, is to make Thailand less dependent on energy, namely the importation of oil, gas and coal, and even electricity from Laos. And second is to be less dependent on the use of chemicals and insecticides and fertilizers for agriculture, because insecticides and fertilizers and so on, I think the base of it is they come from gas, from natural gas and so on. But Thailand has plenty of sun, and Thailand has plenty of agricultural produce, and I think the diversity in the environment. So a lot of plants, both cultivated and natural, could and many of the waste of food and so on could be turned into raw materials for fuel and for the production of electricity. So in that sense, Thailand under General Prayut Chan-o-cha should put the most urgency, priority and concentration on becoming less and less dependent on the importation of oil, gas, coal and fertilizers and chemicals and so on, to be self-reliant by using the sun as solar energy and all the agricultural produce and all the plants for the production of chemicals, for the production of natural fertilizers and so on. And at the same time, it would have the benefit in terms of health and the preservation of the environment. When you start not using the chemicals and so on, it will be good for the health of the farmer. It will be good for every consumer, that you will be eating food that is non-toxic. And so in that sense, I think Prayut government has to restructure more or less the energy sector of Thailand, and to restructure the agricultural practices of Thailand to be less dependent, or to get rid of chemicals altogether as soon as possible. At the same time, I think the Prayut government has to look in a very thorough manner that the question of inequality, the gaps between the rich and poor, 1% of the Thai citizen owning about 60-70% of the wealth and so on. We cannot go on as a society in this direction where there is much of the income gap and gap in the quality of life and so on. So I think General Prayut Chan-o-cha and his government and successive governments to come and so on have to stop, I think, relying on the, I think, immediate expediency measures of populist policy measures of handing out, giving out money and so on. And sometimes the money from the tax is not enough, then Thailand had to recourse to borrowing from abroad and so on. Again, another dependency mentality. But populist policy measures of giving money out is not productive. It could be said it's counterproductive. It's only for a short term, measure to shore up the dissatisfaction of the people and the discontentment. What the government or any government has to do is to provide jobs and I think to provide employment. So in that sense, what the government has to do is to be the major investor in order to create jobs and employment in the infrastructure and utilities development, in the renewable and alternative energy, as I have mentioned. Okay, and I think to help the farmers directly on the, I think, the cost of production and so on. And also one thing that has to be done in Thailand is to ensure that there is enough of the water supplied throughout the year for agriculture and for industries as well as for household use. So I think the hastening of the process of the irrigation networking for the whole of Thailand should be one of the priorities of the government. So water, the factors of productions, credit facilities, infrastructure, utilities, and so on. And I think the affordable housing would be another one for the younger generation when they start to work. And at the same time, I think a more guaranteed, I think, price for commodities, for agricultural produce and so on, that do not use chemicals and fertilizers. To use the agricultural waste as fertilizers, and if more of the farmers and so on could use non-toxic, no chemicals and so on for agricultural production, the government should provide incentive and guarantee the high price and so on for all of this production. Of course, the consumer will have to pay more, but I think the consumer could help on the environmental basis, could help the farmers. And at the same time, by consuming, I think, healthy products, non-chemicals, it's good for the health of everyone also. But all of this has to be, I think, more discussed among the, I think, stakeholders in Thailand. And I think the government can come out with a master plan and to be able to explain to the people, for them to understand and to rally the people so that the whole society can move forward together. But what it's all about is that it's to close the inequality gap, to be more friendly to the environment, and at the same time to be more self-reliant, self-dependent instead of being dependent on other countries, I think, and so on, for materials, for knowledge and all of this. I think Thailand has the capacity to do so. What has been lacking all along is the vision and the political will to really do so. So let's get the work together to move Thailand in this restructuring of the energy sector in the agricultural sector. Thank you very much.